Welcome folks back to 2 degrees down here, just north of Brisbane, back in the apartment. We're still on the segments of and the so-called series of discussions from the throne, and focusing still on the aviation side of things. We are looking at Dead Man's Curve. This is very related to helicopter flying. A lot of people out there might have heard of Dead Man's Curve in the aviation sense of things. There's also been there's American sort of saying Dead Man's Curve. We're on roads, we're going down roads and you can't see a blind corner. It's known as Dead Man Curve. I think there's one in the Hollywood Boulevard where there's a lot of windy roads and so forth. And I think also James Dean back in, I think it was 1961, came short, but I'm speaking under correction here. So in the comments there, maybe comment about it. I think he came short on a Dead Man's Curve, so called. But there's been a couple of songs out there. But focusing back on, for all you folks out there that's interested in aviation, you enthusiasts, your pilots out there, we're just going to have a brief little look at Dead Man's Curve, what it's about, because you hear about it and how it's related to helicopter flying, how to stay out of it, how to stay out of trouble and all that. So let's get into it. So looking at this, before we go into the graphs and things, because it's basically one graph, it's called the height velocity graph. Basically, Dead Man's Curve is basically the slang term for a height velocity graph diagram. So it's basically, it's a relationship between height above the ground and velocity forward. So before we go to that diagram, we'll have just a brief discussion about potential energy and kinetic energy. So for all those folks maybe skipped a couple of physics lessons there at school and maybe had a smoke behind the bicycle sheds and stuff, like, instead of going to physics class, let's just look at let's recap on that potential energy. It's so simple. Potential energy is basically, it's like it says it has the potential to do energy. So like, for example, a car sitting on the top of a hill that needs to get a servo, is running out of fuel, it's on top of a hill, the servo, the petrol station at the bottom of the hill. Well, it's got potential to get down there. All you got to do is release the park brake, free wheel down there, it's got the potential energy. That's, so just as, for example, a helicopter or airplane high up in the sky, it's got potential to get that energy going. Kinetic energy is basically energy in the motion. As it moves along, the ball's rolling, so-called, it's got that kinetic energy. So let's get into the graph here, and then, excuse me, sweet stuff. Anyway, we look at a height velocity diagram here, and good God, I'm going to draw it in red here because the red seems to come out better. You know, my mate Tony said the red's coming out better than all other colors. But anyway, we'll do it in red here. Let's have a look here. We're not going to go too crazy and too sophisticated in this whole lot. We're just going to do a HV diagram. Okay, looking at that, now I'm going to look at the height up there. I'm just going to put HT, and that will probably be like hundreds of feet up there. And velocity, I'm just going to put V here in knots. That's what we normally talk about in aircraft, knots. That's a whole discussion, knots, statute, miles, kilometers. it's a whole subject by itself. So we just look at that speed going, you know, we're moving through the knots in the air or over the ground or whatever. We'll discuss it at a later time. What's the difference, relevance of knots and kilometers and miles and that. Knots forward, height above. We start at 0 here. Let's take it up to about, we'll take it at 800 feet. One, all the way to 800 feet. I'm just going to put 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 times 100. So that's 800 feet above the ground, and let's take it to 90 knots. One, two, three, four. So, height velocity diagram, very simple. 0 at the corner, going all the way up to 800 feet, 0 to 90 knots. But remember as well, all your aircraft or all your helicopters and that, they should have a height velocity diagram. It's all different depending on the aircraft and the helicopter. So we're just using this basically as a prime example. So don't get too technical about it, you know what I mean? We're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So what does the HV diagram look like? It looks like a big gut, like a boepens. So you know, the Afrikaans term is a boepens. It's probably not a good thing, you know what I mean? It's because you know your health. You've got to try to keep as slim as possible, you know, keep the stomach weight. Okay, get back into this. All that, let's say, take it 800 feet, all the way there, just about 0. So this thing in the basically height velocity diagram, this area here in the so-called boepens is the danger area. How does that relate to helicopters? Because most folk out there, they just got this concept, helicopters, they just take off, they hover up, so-called fly away, and they can do that, but there's a big danger area. So, meaning how to safely depart a helicopter. We're talking mostly single engine aircraft here, like Robbie 22s, 44s and so forth, Swizes and things like single engines. You don't want to just depart hovering up like this, up to, like, for example, 700 feet, then go away, because that means at any time you take off here, you could be sitting in this danger area. What does that mean to on the further side of things is, if you just hover up, you take off to 5, let's say we're sitting at 500 feet here, at 10 knots, you had engine failure. You're sitting at this position here, you don't have enough potential energy and kinetic energy to safely execute an auto rotation. What is an auto rotation? An auto rotation is basically, it's for on helicopter terms, it is like a safe glide onto a landing spot. So aircraft that have engine failure, they become basically gliders. They can, once we have engine failure, you are able to, if you keep it at the flying speed, you can fly it safely and glide it into a safe landing spot. Same with a helicopter. If you keep it at the rotor RPM, at the correct RPM, you are be able to execute a safe landing somewhere. But you've got to be out of this danger zone, because if you're sitting at 500 feet in the dead man's curve, you don't have sufficient, firstly, potential energy to maintain that rotor RPM, the kinetic energy to keep going forward. So basically, you, in simple terms, you're just going to plummet to the earth and crash. If you were sitting here, on this example, if you were sitting above 800 feet at that spot, it's at 830 feet, you're out of the danger zone. You've got sufficient potential energy to get kinetic energy to execute a forced landing. And it's with helicopters and aeroplanes, a lot of people get the misconception with helicopters. They kind of think you get engine failure, you just like fall out of the sky. Not necessary. You basically glide out of the sky if you're keeping it in the parameters. You glide at a steeper angle, a higher rate of descent, but if you execute it correctly, you can quite safely get it to the ground. So a simple diagram, for example, you've got an aircraft here, it's going to put a tail here, the aircraft, hopefully you see that, and you've got a helicopter going to make a bubble. Airplane has usually, depending on the aircraft type, has a better, way better than a helicopter. Nice glide ratio, depending on the aircraft. Flying like a fighter jet, it's almost like a helicopter. Helicopter usually has a glide ratio something like that. Means you've got to have your so-called finger out and do the right thing. If you're sitting in this area, you're in big trouble. So, how to keep out of trouble? What do? When you depart a helicopter, if possible, and it's not always possible, you know what I mean? There might be trees, there might be buildings in front of you that, for example, that go into that. But if there's not, say you're departing on a flat ground, you want to keep this. Let's hope this blue comes out nicely. From hover to takeoff, you want to keep it. I'm going to redraw it. That comes out there. So at any time in this departure, hope you folks can see that. It's going to work. Come on. There we go. Happy days. So any time in this departure, if you've got engine failure, there, you've got sufficient forward speed. Remember, you're sitting here 40, 50 knots, but at this height, so-called below at 100 knots, at 100 feet, you're able to execute, if your training is correct and so forth, you're proficient with that, you should be able to execute a safe force landing or auto rotation into a flare and landing. But if you think you bloody string fellow hawk and from Airwolf and you're just climbing out like this out of the tower and then depart like that, your engine failure, well, you're going to come short and you're probably going to crash. And this also applies to your approach to landing as well. What one should try to achieve is approach the same flight path, if possible, to your landing zone. Sometimes it's not possible. You know, you could take off out of an area because every takeoff, every landing is different. There might be, for example, there might be a big building here. We draw this in here. Where at that time, you get yourself in a hover, you want to get over this building, of course you can't go through the building. Basically you have to, I'm going to draw this in red here, basically you're going to go into the dead man's curve for a moment of time and then get out of it, depart away. And I've seen a number of occasions where people they don't worry about it. They think they're never going to get engine failure. They're okay. But for a lot of pilots who've maybe got a bit of experience, or anybody, doesn't mean what experience you got, engine failures, it can happen. So stay out of the danger zone. And some pilots don't have, for example, they don't have an option but to operate in that danger zone, so-called dead man's curve. And those would be your, for example, your muster pilots and your game catching pilots, because they're low level, operating at low airspeeds. That's why I take my hat off for them, because it's the nature of the work they do and the extensive flying they do, and there's just, it's a whole subject by itself of they have basically just operated at low level in this danger zone, low airspeeds all the time. So it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of training, because they're in that zone all the time. But anyway, so for your other pilots out there, especially your blokes out there, because I tell you what, guys, fellas, they do silly things, you know what I mean? This is one of those things. That's why they make jackass movies. You see your jackass movies. It's all guys doing silly things. You know what I mean? They're going down trolleys off the bloody roofs of houses and things. You never see the girls, except when they have a couple of toots. They start getting silly. But remember, guys, a lesson for you guys: stay out of the danger zone. And this can go in your relationship as well. You know what I mean? It's like, for example, say your missus, she comes out with a new dress and she says, hey, does this dress make me look chubby? And you reckon yes. Do you know what you're doing? You're saying yes. Do you know what that equals? Danger. Basically, what you've done, you've said yes. Put yourself in the danger zone. You put yourself in dead man's curve. Do you know what you should have said? You should have stayed safe. Get this one here. Let's get it. We've got to make this clear, man. We've got to make clear to Okies here, eh? Stay here. You just say you're looking. I'm going to put a tick here. You know what I mean? You're looking good. You're looking good, because most girls look beautiful. And you said, no, you're looking beautiful. Do you know what that would have mean? You would have departed that whole scene. You would have got a lot of loving. You would have gone out somewhere. I'm going to draw this heart here. I hope you see it. Now you listen, kids. You must listen here now. You would have departed nicely, and a nice evening. Go and dance in that. And you would have approached back, nice landing, safe, out of that danger zone. But no, you get some football. He reckons yes, he's going to reckon yes. You know what, he's gone straight into dead man's curve. Because you don't know that mental state, what that's going to happen there. It's like a helicopter. At any time it can fail on you. And it can, there you in dead man's curve, you're going to plummet. Keep it safe. Get that heart, it's from the heart. Approach, landing, and then you're safe. Anyway, I hope that made any sense to you guys. And you girls out there, stay out of the danger zone. Thanks for watching. Speak to you next time.